Hey everyone, welcome back to the Team Empire channel. It's JC, and Jack just recently finished his standard tier list, so I figured it'd be time to also back it up with a premium tier list. It's also been about a year since there's been a premium tier list on the channel, and premium usually gets like massive support once a year, so I figured like this is a pretty good time to start talking about it. Also, there's a few more BCSs left before Worlds. So I figured this video would either be for anyone who's trying to, prepare for their premium event over the next few days, or if someone just wants to keep up with the format going into Worlds. So we have all the clans here, and then instead of like S through D or whatever, I just have it separated by like best decks, competes, rogue, unplayable. And then I'm not really going to focus too much on ordering the clans within each tier. I'm just going to kind of categorize it and then let everyone else debate in the comments what they think. So we'll actually start with what I think is the best clan right now in the format, which is Granblue. I think Granblue, being one of the crest decks, which is obviously like a make or break in this format, is the best. And this is debatable, I know, because Granblue out of all of them is the happiest, even if it doesn't see its crest maker, because it just plays a normal Granblue game. And I know you've probably heard that on other channels before, but really, like, if you've ever played Premium, you've probably played against Granblue at some point prior to crest, and you know how well that deck scales just by, like, milling its pieces and by getting a big drop zone. And so, obviously, I think there's another clan in this list that is actually better than Granblue if it sees its crest, but again, that's like, it's not a super small chance of seeing your crest, but like it happens, and a lot of crest builds will just, throw everything away until they find their grade 1, because that's how powerful that strategy is, if you could call it a strategy, making a crest. So now we'll just go in alphabetical order, since that's what the website has determined for us. Angel Feather definitely competes. I think that some people would put it in best deck because of how well Gize has been converting. I would put it like at the top of competes, because even though against a lot of decks it really is kind of like an auto win, there is still the chance of like you just not flipping your Xeroths, and I know it seems kind of unlikely with how well Gize has been converting, but there's a chance you don't see your defensives, or you don't see enough like triggers, or even the over trigger. The other thing is their Megacolony gatekeeps this pretty well, even with only 2 Gridora, which we'll talk about later down the line. But Gize has gotten a lot of really good tools over the past year in all these like V promos, and the purple OT is insanely strong in this deck, and for some reason every time I play against one they always check it. Yes, there's some salt, like just throw some salt out there. Aqua Force. I'm sorry, I really like Aqua Force, but like so does Jack. He's actually in the room with me.
Hey.
But I think Aqua Force is just a little too fair now that like ride down format's done, and there's a lot of disruption in all of like the best decks, and that's really bad against Aqua Force, because if they do like try to do a Genbold turn that doesn't have more than like 1 Excel, they can't draw a billion cards, can't get their restands. Valios is really, really good, but like isn't as effective early in the game. So I actually got cooked by Aqua Force at BCS Tampa, but it's because they checked a bunch of crits, so good for that player. But I think it's just a little too fair, and unfortunately, like things like Link Joker really hurt this clan, because you can just like erase their Excel markers, and that's just not fun, because it kind of does need those, unless you're trying to just go for like a Megiddo win. So Bermuda, or Highlander, I guess is still the most relevant deck. I think it competes. The only problem with Bermuda is like if you're playing Highlander, if you don't see reindeer, you're gonna cry. If you don't see good like ride targets off reindeer, you're gonna cry. If you see everything that you want, then you're probably gonna win. Like and that's just the reality. The deck also does thin pretty reliably. Like it draws more cards now with more recent D series support. So I think it still does really, really well. The only thing is, like, again, if you take it to an event, you're kind of gambling. Not as much as Gize, because Gize does have a lot of really reliable cards to buff consistency. That's why Angel Feather's the best clan to. It's always been the best clan to play with Gize. So, yeah, Bermuda, I put it in competes, because it's still like it's had a few conversions here and there. Dark Irregulars is Rogue. I think it'll always kind of sit in that tier, even with Hope on Damp, because, again, you need CB, you need CNLK, which isn't that impossible. Like, usually you find your targets, you know. But the deck does have to rely on still its, you know, its main strategy since, what, 2018, Jack?
Pretty much.
2018, which is, like, getting the NLK, getting your Assassin, getting enough Soul, and then reaching to a point where you can Hope on Damp into 4-Fox, your Stride. And those turns usually win. I will admit, they usually win. So I'd say it's a very rogue deck, you know. And there's a lot of really hardcore DI players out there that, I mean, will never stop playing the deck, and therefore it'll always be around. Dimension Police, I think it still competes. I think the main reason Dimension Police still competes is because Linka is a very unfair card. And that's like, sure, it sounds a little salty, but it's just true. You know, if you find the Linka, they need the Elementaria, and they need you not to check a billion crits or the Overtrigger. The other thing that's like crazy about Linka is it combos well with the old Commander Laurel, because if you don't have Elementaria, you're probably gonna hit, and then you're gonna restand, and then you're gonna you're gonna have big number with crit again. So Dimension Police hasn't really changed. And because of that, I think it still competes. It can just kind of steal wins. And I'm going to put it... I know I said I'm not really going to order these, but I will put it over Bermuda because it's more consistent. So, Gear Chronicle's kind of weird. I think I'm going to put it in Compete because it does have a crest, which means that it can scale with the crest decks, but it doesn't have the same level of like unfairness that the other crest decks do. It has Head Around Dragon, which is a really, really good G-Guard. And you will play that since you have to ride
Chronojet.
Forgot his name for 2 seconds. But unfortunately, I think if this clan misses its crest, it is very susceptible to opponents' defensives. And if I'm correct, I don't think it pluses as much as like Granblue. So, and I could be wrong about that. I know some Gear Chronicle mains, maybe I need to talk to them, but I think it competes, you know, like having a crest alone gives you kind of a leg up. So, Genesis has a bunch of unfair cards, therefore it does compete. Fenrir is still like the main deck, I guess you would see played. The biggest problem with Fenrir, even though it does compete, is that it almost always goes to time. It is a very slow strategy, slow deck. It has Dreaming Dragon, which can just completely refresh its deck size. So if the opponent is able to keep up with that, then they're probably going to go to time and double loss, unfortunately. Because like you can survive a Fenrir turn pretty easily, if I'm correct about that, Jack.
Yeah, you can. They're not that strong.
It's like 4 attacks, maybe 5 if you're striding. You know, and the most unfair thing this deck has right now, well, there's 2 things, but one that's Fenrir specific is Melissa. And a lot of decks do just completely fold to that. Like, it's a super effective strategy against things like Aquaforce or some later clans that we're going to talk about. Regalia is also still really good, but it hasn't changed much, you know, so it's, you know, it doesn't have as, like, reliable of a win con, in my opinion, as Fenrir, even though that win con is very dependent on what your opponent is playing. Gold Paladin is very rogue. I think Gold Paladin is always... It won't let me... Ugh, there we go. All right. I think Gold Paladin has always done really well for, you know, for the clan that it... For what it is, since like the Ezel bans and stuff. I think your main build is still Gurgit, and trying to figure out, like, am I going for a, like, Excel spam, which I guess that's most lists, but like Excel spam with my like restand strides, or am I leaving out the Overtrigger and going for Ultima? Because Ultima is a really solid win con, but it is difficult to reach sometimes, especially if you're not doing like superior striding stuff like with the Ezel builds. And you can survive an Ultima turn. I know some people would think otherwise, but like if Pale Moon gets its crest, or if you're playing even just against normal Granblue, like, they can survive an Ultimate turn. Trust. You know, so... But Percival is a very good card, obviously. And Gurgit has very reliable defensive capabilities. But having... I do think it's a little more unfair than Aquaforce, or stronger, I should say. That's why it's not in the unplayable category, because it reaches higher ceilings pretty quick. And if you're playing Ezel and you know, get the stuff... then you're going to have superior stride. I think Jack played against an Ezel player at BCS Tampa.
I did.
So, cool. Great Nature. Yeah, this is Great Nature. Great Nature will also go in Rogue. It actually has seen some results this BCS, and I think Great Nature has a great card pool, no pun intended. But the problem is that Great Nature's really good at like hyper specifying in a format, meaning like you build your defensive or offensive capabilities around certain weaknesses in the format, right? So like if your opponent has very rearguard dependent things, you play Almirage, which can disrupt, similar to like Neo Nectar, similar to like Granblue, or Bermuda even. Or if it has Narukami, that's another way that you can disrupt, But I actually think the format is a little too diverse for Great Nature to really shine. Also, the deck does still run a lot of like old G cards, meaning that it still has the Great Nature problem, which is just you're missing out on a lot of shield. But I do think this deck can win games, and it also draws a lot of cards even without Spangled because of Big Belly. So good for Great Nature players. So Kagero, usually goes in unplayable, and I would say that like 70% of the time it does. But I'm gonna put it at the very bottom of Rogue because it did see a result, I think, in like a European BCS. And when I think about it, and maybe Jack could like pitch in on this, if you go first, if you find the cross, and if you see yellow cards, I think you're gonna win.
Probably. If your opponent doesn't have a heal card too, that's a lot of variables. But
It is. So like I think we could put it at the bottom of Rogue because restanding Vanguards are a pretty good way to like push into the format right now with how like powerful Crest is. But if you don't win that turn, then you're probably cooked because your hand size is like non-existent in this deck. So I'm just gonna put it there. Link Joker definitely competes. I think Deleter Messiah is still probably the best build in my opinion because like Messiah Crest is a Crest deck. However, like it doesn't have as many unfair things going for it or combos going for it until it reaches Integral. And Integral Messiah is a super unfair card.
Yeah, pretty much wins the game.
I mean, it just resets your hand, and you have to pray that you draw a PG after that reset. So like super unfair. But Deleter Messiah, I think, or just Deleter plays in general, very very strong because they have like such a high ceiling with attacks, Vanguard restands with crits, and like Link Joker has really good tools too. Like if your opponent doesn't know about your G guards, they can very easily play into like locking their back row, which is important against some strategies. Also, I don't remember his name, but the stride that gets rid of gifts is really good against like Barrio End. Thank you. Maybe Jack will put it right here. He's really good against strategies that are leaning into history collection stuff. That stride is also pretty good against Harry, even if they see their crest, because that deck's only way, or at least most builds, of making a gift is from the history stride play. So
or Yvette, right?
Yeah, yes, sorry. They also have Yvette. That was actually wrong. Thank you, Jack. No but that is going into a Yvette stride from either a Dark Lord or just hard striding into Yvette, which, I mean, that does take them back a step, So that's an interesting thing. I think it competes, and also Locke's just super annoying, like, and if they see Zirconium, then it makes the game a lot harder to manage. Megacolony. Okay, so I was thinking about this the other day about whether or not it goes like I should put it here or even at the end of best decks. I think putting it up in best decks would be a little too giving it a little too much credit, because like the Gridora hit hasn't done a lot in my opinion, and in most people's opinions, obviously, since Mythiarch Colony is converting so well. Because now that they don't have 4 Gridora, people have just refined the win con of the deck, which is now, instead of just doing Gridora until your opponent inevitably dies, after second, or even sometimes first Gridora, they go into their Zeroth Dragon. And Megiddo, in combination with Delphina, which is the restander in Mythiarch, is really, really good, because you can get like a very high ceiling of attacks, especially if you're able to use the Malignantis on that turn as well. I know that's a lot of CB, but that is possible, and you would like minus your opponent's power. And Delphina also plays well into like Zeroth Dragon plays because she adds back Persona Ride. So if you're not Persona Riding, you just use that for your ultimate stride fodder. So this deck is still very, very strong. I think its biggest weakness is there's a lot of rogue and other decks in competes that actually like destroy Megacolony. Like I played Narukami competitively all season, and anytime I saw a Megacolony, I was just smiling because that's a really bad matchup for them. I would say same goes for like, really good into Angel Gize. So like it plays well into the Crest decks, you know. So that's the best reason to bring it. But it does get defeated by a lot of these other like weaker strategies, quote unquote. So that's Megacolony. Murakumo, I think it's unplayable. The biggest reason is because Megacolony is still so popular, and this deck just gets like hard shut down, like super hard, harder than Granblue because we don't have Bad Bounty. Also, it needs to survive into its like big kill turn, especially if you're playing like Shirayuki, and you need a bunch of CB, which you probably won't have against the Crest decks because your hand size isn't big enough. So, you know, when you get to that high damage, you're just gonna like fold, which is really sad because like if Crest didn't exist and if Megacolony was a little less prevalent, I feel like this deck could do okay. But Narukami still competes. Narukami plays really well into a lot of these strategies. Maybe we do it like here. Yeah, Narukami's really good into Megacolony, like I was saying. It's also pretty good into Granblue. It's better if they don't see their Crest, obviously. It's decent into Nectar. I say decent, like I don't want to start any fights about Nectar. And again, a lot of these rogue strategies just don't have a plan against Narukami anymore like they used to because it has been hit a lot on the ban list. And so people, I just don't think they prepare for it as much. I think if things are going well, the best Narukami deck is probably Dragonic Descendant, Superior Ride stuff. But that's similar to Crest build stuff, but weaker in my opinion. Everything has to go correct, and you need to go first. It's not like the Crest decks, they just want to see their Crest, but that build specifically has to go first. So I think like Eradicator, mid-range style builds are still perfectly fine, and you try to get into your GB8 or your Voltage or like something that's going to like power through. Exterminate's also a very good card against Harry. That stride gets like plus 40k, draws 4 cards, like really, really good. Nectar, it's still one of the best decks. It keeps up very well with the Crest. It has really good early rush, which is really good into Harry in particular out of all these Crest builds, and good against Shiranui. Draws cards. I mean, it's still Nectar. Still does what it doesn't necessarily scale as well as like Harry with its Crest, but I mean, Katrina is just a very, very good card. That's the end of the story. Victor. People give Victor a lot of credit. I still like Victor and Novas in general. I'm still going to put it at the like top of Rogue.
What about Ashura Kaiser?
I like Ashura Kaiser or Ashura or however you say it. I like that build. But like Victor is still the most popular. I think if this deck ever does get a Crest, that would be a huge problem.
I think if any other Excel deck gets a Crest, it'd be crazy.
Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about right now, I guess. I guess that's it. Like the thing with Victor is, you know, it still has Bustard, which is a crazy card. But Bustard, you just need a PG, and then you just need to not let them get to like GB8 somehow, which isn't that difficult to do, because this deck also loses pretty hard to defensives. I mean, like, yeah, like pretty dang hard. But if it... Go ahead.
Just wait till a Rotovice card works well on premium.
That'd be funny. So, anyway, I think it's fair here. I know some Nova... there's a lot of Nova fans out there. They're probably not going to agree, but, you know, that to each their own. Nubatama, one of the best decks still. It's the highest converting premium deck this BCS. I think it's because it's been around the longest out of all the Crest decks, and like, you know, it still has Rine, it still has Misukaze, which is a crazy card. Like, that card needs to be banned for sure. And you know, it's not that unhappy if it misses Crest, but it really does need it. Yeah, it just really needs to see Crest to like secure the win, because I think you still have good odds of winning against some of these strategies if you miss, but you probably don't want to miss. I know it's not super insightful, but like I'm sure everyone's played against Shiranui in this format at this point. Oracle Think Tank. I'll put it in Rogue. I think that there's a lot of unfair stuff like Popo in this deck. And like I guess if you're still doing like Silent Tom stuff, even though it hasn't been as popular recently, it just doesn't draw a lot of cards, and it's very like build specific. You know, there's a bunch of different builds in OTT, but none of them are really reaching that unfair level in my opinion. Also, even though it does scry and stuff, like scry is very powerful, weirdly enough, like a lot of decks in Premium draw so many cards that your opponent's scrying could actually be pretty helpful in your like guard pattern. I don't know, I think Rogue's fine. It actually did have there was a Susanoo top this year, which is pretty hype, but I think this is fair where it is. Alright, we get to Pale Moon. So Pale Moon, definitely one of the best decks. I think if it sees its crest, it is probably the best deck in the format. Like, I'm just going to put that out there. This deck hasn't really changed at all. In hindsight, like, it still plays all the good stuff, Pale Moon cards with Harry, with some, like, additional D cards. The only difference now is that, like, the crest scales really, really well with things like Dark Lord Princess, with the History Stride. Even, like, your first Clifford, like, Superior Stride turn is insane, because the combo potential in this deck is insane. The only reason I'm putting it right there in particular is because if it misses its crest, it's I think a crying baby or something, like whatever, however.
Coughing baby means?
Coughing baby, that's what Solemn said. I like that assessment. It is a coughing baby. So, I mean, if you want to know more about Pale Moon, go look at like Commander Jaime or I think Derek Dow. Like they go into Crest Harry combos. So if you're going to play at a BCS and you want to try to do well, like learn about this deck for sure, because it's really hard to prepare for. This is Royal Paladin, and I think it's Rogue. You know, Royal Paladin Jewel Knight has been very popular. It's also a very beginner friendly deck. Crystal Luster Dragon is a really, really good card. It's not as unfair as like some of the other turn-wide Garter sticks. And Jewel Knights is very susceptible to like G-Guard defensive plays. So I think it's Rogue. I think it's a very good stuff deck. You know, it just doesn't have a lot of the unfairness that some of these other decks have. So Shadow Paladin, I think it competes. I think Shadow Paladin, specifically like Revenger, because that is like probably the most popular build right now. Revenger does like really good things. Going first, it can steal games if you check like an overtrigger. But, you know, you're not really doing anything other than that. So if your opponent has PGs, or if your opponent just like takes a bunch of damage and then like blows you up with their first stride, then that's just the way it is. It's a more reliable Overlord, in my opinion, that draws a few more cards. What do you think, Jack?
I think that's a fair assessment.
Also, force markers scale well with it.
Yes.
Yeah. And like you could play like Crest Luard, but the problem with Crest Luard in comparison to the other decks is it just does not draw. You know, like Morfessa sounds really unfair with Crest, but you got to get there. You got to get to that point. And you got to play against something that's not like Narukami. I played against a Luard player at BCS Tampa. They never had Ritual, ever. I was like, I'm sorry. You know. Spike Brothers competes. Hellhard GB8 loop is very, very scary. And like, if your strategy doesn't go well, or you don't have like decent early rush, they will get to their GB8. And if you don't know about the strategy and you're not able to kind of like gate out their GB, meaning like if you give them one extra attack and they're able to G-Guard into their like GB7, then that's probably it. You know, and it's a pretty old deck too, so I would like look at some old Hellhard games. There's also some really good footage from like Echo. It's like a Twitch streamer, European Twitch streamer who streams a lot of BCSs, and he has a couple Hellhard games. Tachikaze, I'm sorry, Tachikaze, unplayable. I don't know, man. It's just like it doesn't have the same level of like ceiling and unfairness as it used to, and it cannot play a long game because it decks out. Sure, there's an infinite loop, but like it's really hard to obtain and not really worth bringing the deck for that reason alone. it has high combo potential, but it loses harder to defensives than some of these other decks we've been talking about. Like Aquaforce doesn't cry that much at 1 defensive. Neither does Golds. Neither does Victor. You know, and Tachi, you know, it's really susceptible, I think, to like G-Guard plays as well. So you can see here, I think there's a lot of decks that do compete, but if you bring one of those decks, you have to make sure that you're prepared for the top 4 decks because they're probably the most represented. And I think maybe this is kind of a niche take. I think if your deck has space for something like Angel Ladder, then it would be a good thing to play because all the Crest builds do have some form of like disruption that could just help them survive into one more stride that kills you. And in Premium, that scales a lot better with Crest than it does in Standard. Like 1 extra turn can mean an additional 10 or 15k from their Crest compared to last turn. So thank you for watching if you made it all the way to the end. I feel like this was, you know, a decent conversation about Premium. If you have any comments, whether that's like anything you agree with or disagree with, please leave it down below. Remember, this is just my opinion, so like don't take it personally if your clan is in a tier that you don't want it to be in. And yeah, I'm really hoping that Premium, you know, gets some sort of wave of support this summer. I guess we'll know pretty soon. So thank you again for watching. Leave a like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Bye.